My name's Jake, and if there was ever a moment that showed me exactly where I stood in my own family, it was 3 years ago, right here in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's funny how you think you've figured things out, that you've moved past the childish need for your parents' approval, until you realize they never really saw you at all. I co-founded a company with a friend straight out of college, something small at first that grew faster than either of us expected. By 27, I was leading a team of 50, pulling long hours but proud of what I'd built. Meanwhile, my sister, Amy, was still figuring herself out, bouncing between jobs, dating flashy guys who looked good on Instagram but didn't stick around long. My parents? Well, they were smitten with her every move, every new boyfriend, every mediocre achievement dressed up like a gold medal. At first, it didn't bother me. I told myself I wasn't in it for their praise. I had my own goals, my own path. But that illusion cracked the day I found out I wasn't invited to Mom's birthday party. Not a small gathering, mind you. It was a full-on catered affair, backyard lights strung up, a live band, the works. I found out about it the night before when a coworker, yes, a coworker, sent me a picture on Instagram. There was my family, posing around a giant cake, Amy in the middle with her new boyfriend, some guy I'd never even met. And me? I wasn't even a footnote. When I asked my dad about it the next morning, he said, without a hint of apology, that they thought I'd be too busy or that I'd feel awkward since, as he put it, Amy's boyfriend was such an impressive guy. That one landed like a punch to the chest. Impressive. As if my company, my life, my efforts weren't enough to even warrant a chair at the table. That was the first crack in the dam. But I had no idea how deep the fracture really ran. I wish I could say I brushed it off, that I shrugged and went back to work, too busy with board meetings and deadlines to care. But the truth is, I sat in my office that day staring at the picture for hours, zooming in and out like some lost kid peeking into a world he wasn't invited to. The funny thing is, I didn't even realize who the guy in the picture was until weeks later. We were in the middle of onboarding new hires at the company. One of the managers handed me a file and casually mentioned, "Oh, this one's from UNC too. Solid references. Went through the same business program you did, Jake." I glanced at the name on the folder. My stomach twisted. There it was. The name I'd only heard secondhand from Amy. The impressive boyfriend my father had gushed over. He wasn't just some Instagram boyfriend. He was now my employee. I laughed then. Not a happy laugh. A dry, hollow kind of laugh that scraped its way out of my throat. Of all the companies, of all the positions, he ended up here, under me. And the best part? He had no idea who I was. He'd walked into my office the first day, all bright smiles and ambition, shook my hand like we were equals, told me how excited he was to learn from me, how grateful he was for the opportunity. And all I could think was, if only you knew, buddy. If only you knew. It was like watching the universe hand me a front row seat to the world's most awkward irony. And yet, deep down, a part of me couldn't help but wonder, was this my chance? A cosmic balancing act? Or just another painful reminder of how small the world really was? Sometimes I wonder if they even realized what I'd been doing all those years. Every month, like clockwork, I'd log into the utility accounts tied to my parents' house, electricity, water, internet. I'd make the payments quietly, never mentioning it. It wasn't about the money. It was about making sure they were comfortable, safe, cared for. A gesture, I thought, of love. Or maybe of duty. I never really questioned it. It started when Dad lost his job and Mom's hours got cut. I'd just started the company back then. Things were tight, but I managed. I told myself I was paying it forward, helping them get back on their feet. But even when their situation stabilized, I kept covering the bills. And not once did they ask, "Hey, who's been paying these?" Not once did they say thank you. Maybe they thought the bills were cheaper than they were. Maybe they assumed some government assistance kicked in. Or maybe, and this is what stung the most, maybe they knew and just didn't care enough to acknowledge it. And the craziest part? Even after being left out of Mom's birthday party, even after realizing my dad thought I was awkward next to Amy's boyfriend, I kept paying. Every month. Quietly. Like clockwork. Until the day Dad said the words that broke something inside me. "If you insist on doing what you want, don't call me your father." He'd said it over the phone, his voice low, tired, distant. I don't even remember what I'd done to insist. Maybe it was turning down yet another family dinner. Maybe it was not giving Amy a loan she'd asked for through them. It didn't matter. The sentence landed like a steel door slamming shut. "Don't call me your father." And just like that, I logged into the accounts and canceled every automatic payment. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. Mom's birthday rolled around again, like clockwork, only this time I wasn't staring at it through a phone screen, wishing I'd been invited. I didn't even know if they'd sent an invite this time. I'd stopped checking. But I knew the party was happening. Amy's boyfriend-turned-fiancé had posted about it days before, boasting about the epic bash they were planning at my parents' house. That house. The one I'd been quietly keeping afloat for years. The house whose walls I'd patched, whose roof I'd paid to fix after a storm. The house that wouldn't have stood half as long if I hadn't been covering the bills no one ever thanked me for. And that night, while they danced under string lights in the backyard, sipping wine and posting filtered selfies, something inevitable happened. The power went out. At first, I thought maybe it was just a neighborhood outage. But then my phone buzzed. First a text from Amy, then another from Mom, then a call from Dad, and then more texts piling in, one after the other. Jake, the electricity's out. Do you know why? The water's not running. Wi-Fi's down. Can you check? And that's when it hit me. They didn't even realize how much they depended on me until everything I'd been holding up quietly started crumbling without me. I watched the phone buzz in my hand, unread messages stacking up like a timeline of desperation. They didn't want me. They wanted what I could do for them. And for the first time in years, I let the phone keep ringing. I sat there, alone in my apartment, staring out at the Charlotte skyline, feeling both emptier and freer than I'd ever felt in my life. That night, as I sat on the couch watching the phone buzz over and over, a strange calm settled over me. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't even revenge. It was release. Like a rope I'd been pulling for years had finally snapped, and all the weight I'd been dragging behind me slipped into the dark. They kept calling. First Mom, then Amy, then Dad again. Each call a little more frantic than the last. I imagined them in the darkened house, candles flickering uselessly against the growing realization that nothing was working. That their party had screeched to a halt because the very foundations they'd never acknowledged were gone. It wasn't just the lights. The water had stopped too. The Wi-Fi had cut out. The music was silent. I pictured Amy's boyfriend, the guy who thought he was impressive, fumbling with the router, checking breakers he didn't understand, standing useless in the middle of the chaos. The guests murmuring, starting to leave. Mom's smile collapsing as she tried to explain. Dad blaming the city, then the power company, then whoever he could accept the truth. I didn't answer the phone. I didn't text back. I didn't even open their messages. I just let them sit there. Because for the first time, they weren't reaching out to check on me. They weren't calling because they missed me or because they wanted to rebuild some bridge. No, they were calling because they needed me. That was the difference. And I wasn't going to pretend otherwise anymore. By midnight, the call slowed. By 1 a.m., they'd stopped completely. The last message I received was from Amy. We're freezing. Please, just tell us what to do. I stared at that message for a long time. Not because I wanted to help, but because I realized how fragile their world had been without me and how little they'd noticed until it collapsed. And the truth hit me like a cold wind. They hadn't been a family. They'd been a machine. And I was just one of the hidden gears, expected to keep turning silently. No thanks, no recognition, until the day I stopped. And when I stopped, the whole thing seized up. They hadn't called again. No new messages. Just silence. I figured maybe they'd called an electrician, or a plumber, or begged a neighbor for help. Maybe Amy's boyfriend had tried to fix it, the way men like him always think they can solve things they don't understand with confidence alone. And part of me hoped, selfishly, maybe cruelly, that they had to sit in that discomfort just a little longer. That they'd finally ask themselves, how did this happen? And who kept it all going until now? But life has a way of writing stories even stranger than you imagine. Around noon, as I was finishing up some work emails, my office door knocked. It wasn't unusual, people popping all the time, but when I looked up and saw him standing there, I almost laughed aloud. Amy's boyfriend. In my office. Holding a folder. Hey, Mr. Cooper, he said nervously, shifting from foot to foot. Do you have a minute? Mr. Cooper. Not Jake. Not Amy's brother. Just his boss. I leaned back, steepling my fingers. Sure. Come in. He stepped in, sat down, glanced around like he wasn't sure what was safe to say. Listen, he started. I didn't want to make it awkward, but I just found out. You're Amy's brother? I raised an eyebrow. Took you long enough. He flushed. Yeah. I didn't put it together until last night. At the party. When everything went out, your mom was freaking out, and she kept saying, call Jake, call Jake. Only Jake knows what to do. I stayed quiet. He rubbed the back of his neck. And then I realized, you're the reason the lights were on in the first place, huh? He looked at me then, really looked, like he was seeing me for the first time. They never told me. Never mentioned it. I thought they had everything handled. I didn't know. I watched him fumble, trying to stitch together a family narrative that had never been real. They rely on you, he said softly. Way more than they admit. There it was. The reckoning. And for the first time, it didn't hurt. It just confirmed what I'd already known. He left my office quietly after that, closing the door behind him like he didn't want to stir up more than he already had. And for a few minutes, I just sat there, staring at the folder he'd forgotten on the chair. His onboarding paperwork. His future in my hands, whether he realized it or not. Funny, isn't it? The man my parents had held up as impressive, the man they'd practically shoved in my face as proof that I didn't measure up, he reported to me. And until last night, he hadn't even known it. The irony tasted bittersweet. But the story wasn't done. Not even close. Around 3 p.m., my phone buzzed again. A different tone this time, a video call. It was Mom. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then, against my better judgment, I answered. Her face filled the screen, weary and makeup smudged, the exhaustion of last night written all over her. Behind her, Dad paced back and forth, his jaw tight, his shirt rumpled. Amy sat slouched at the kitchen table, scrolling her phone, deliberately not looking up. Jake, Mom said, voice soft but urgent. We need to talk. I leaned back, silent. We're sorry, she rushed on. We didn't realize how much you were doing. We didn't know. Dad barked a bitter laugh behind her. We didn't ask you to do it, Jake. The apology landed hollow. Mom shot him a glare but kept her voice calm. We appreciate it. Really? We see it now. I waited. Because here's the thing. They didn't call because they missed me. They called because the bills were still unpaid. Because the lights were still out. Because the water hadn't come back. Because they still needed something. We were wondering, Mom hesitated, her eyes flicking away from the camera. If you could, maybe just cover it for this month? Just until we figure something out? There it was. The real reason. Not an apology. A request. I almost laughed. Almost. But instead, I just stared at her. Silent. And that silence said more than words ever could. The silence stretched between us, heavy, electric. I watched as Mom shifted in her seat, glancing at Dad, glancing at Amy, as if one of them might throw her a lifeline. But no one did. Dad stood there, arms crossed, looking at me like I was the one who'd failed them. Amy finally spoke up, her voice flat, barely masking annoyance. It's just a couple $100, Jake. Seriously. You're acting like we're asking for your kidney. I couldn't help it. I let out a short, breathless laugh. They still didn't get it. They never had. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my desk, locking eyes with the camera. You're right, Amy, I said quietly. It's just money. Mom brightened slightly, thinking maybe I was agreeing. But it's not about the money, I continued. It's about respect. About everything else. Her face fell. I covered your bills for years without a single thank you, I said, voice steady. I paid for that roof. I fixed the plumbing. I made sure you could keep the lights on while you handed everything, over to someone who never lifted a finger for you. Dad snorted. Oh, here we go. I ignored him. You didn't invite me to Mom's birthday because you thought I'd be awkward next to Amy's boyfriend, I said. And you never even bothered to ask what I wanted, what I needed, because I wasn't impressive enough. Amy rolled her eyes. And now, I finished, when it all falls apart, then you remember I exist? No one spoke. Not for a long moment. Then Dad, gruff and bitter, muttered, You think you're better than us now? You've got your fancy job, your company, but you'll always be our son, Jake. And family helps family. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I said quietly. Family helps family. And then I leaned back. But you made it pretty clear, Dad. I ended the call. Let the screen go black. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I'd finally stopped asking to belong. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought hanging up that call would be the final chapter, the clean break I'd been too afraid to make for years. But life, as always, had other plans. It was 2 days later when it happened. I was in the middle of a meeting, nothing urgent, just routine check-ins, when my assistant knocked and poked her head in. Jake, there's someone here to see you. Says it's your family. I froze. For a second, I considered telling her to send them away. But something in me, some stubborn part that wanted to see it through, told me to let them in. I watched as the office door swung open, and walked Mom, Dad, Amy, and, trailing awkwardly behind them, Amy's boyfriend. And the look on his face? That was the twist I didn't see coming. He wasn't cocky. He wasn't smug. He looked embarrassed, uncomfortable, guilty. Mom sat down without waiting to be asked. Jake, she said, tired, resigned. We know everything. I raised an eyebrow. Everything. She nodded. About the bills. About how you've been keeping things going. About how, her voice faltered, he works for you. Amy's boyfriend winced visibly, rubbing the back of his neck. Dad remained standing, arms crossed, but his posture less sure than before. He told us, he grumbled. Your brother-in-law. I almost smiled at that. Brother-in-law. As if giving him a title made him family. Amy's boyfriend stepped forward then, swallowing hard. I told them last night. They needed to know. I couldn't keep pretending. I stared at him. Out of everyone in that room, he was the last person I'd expected honesty from. Mom reached across the desk, her hand trembling. Jake, we're sorry. Truly. We took you for granted. We didn't see what you were doing for us. Amy shifted uncomfortably beside her, avoiding my eyes. Dad sighed, rubbing his temples. Look, Jake, we were wrong, but we need help. And there it was. The apology wrapped in another request. Like always. I sat back, folding my hands. You didn't come here to apologize, I said quietly. You came here because you're scared. No one denied it. No one even tried. And in that silence, I felt the last thread between a snap. I looked at them, all of them, and for a moment, I felt like I was floating outside myself, watching the scene from some higher vantage point. There they were, my parents, tired and pride-wounded, Amy, fidgeting with her phone, her boyfriend, awkward but oddly sincere, and me, the son who'd been invisible until his absence left a mark. I could feel their desperation thick in the air, not just for money, but for rescue. And a small part of me, a part shaped by years of wanting their approval, almost caved. Almost. But I remembered every time I'd been overlooked. Every birthday forgotten, every milestone ignored because Amy had something going on. Every time I'd been praised in passing but never invited into the center. Every moment I'd made things work in the background while they never thought to look at who was holding up the beams. And I realized, this wasn't a rescue. It was a pattern. I'm not angry, I said finally, my voice steady, surprising even myself. I'm tired. Mom opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. I'm tired of being useful instead of loved. Of being a wallet instead of a son. Of being the guy you only remember when something breaks. They fell silent again. Amy looked up at me then, as a little softer. So, what now? I inhaled slowly. I'm done. Those two words hung in the air like a tolling bell. Dad's jaw tightened. You're abandoning your family? I shook my head gently. No. I'm just choosing me for once. Amy's boyfriend stepped forward hesitantly. Jake, they're scared. They didn't know. I met his gaze. They didn't want to know, I corrected. And now it's too late. I stood, walked around the desk, and held out my hand to him. Take care of them, I said simply. He stared at my hand for a long moment before shaking it quietly. And then, without another glance at the three people who'd only come when the lights went out, I walked past them, out of the office, into the bright afternoon sun. And for the first time, the warmth felt like it belonged to me. I walked home that evening feeling lighter than I had in years. Not happy, exactly, happiness wasn't the right word. It was more like a quiet peace settling into the places where old wounds used to ache. When I reached my apartment, I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window, watching the lights of Charlotte twinkle against the night sky. Somewhere out there, my parents were sitting in that cold, quiet house. Maybe still waiting for me to swoop in. Maybe finally realizing I wouldn't. And for the first time, I wasn't imagining them as people I needed to save. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to earn a seat at their table. All the birthdays I'd bought gifts they barely unwrapped. All the small victories I'd shared, only to have them brushed aside with a distracted nod. And now? Now I had my own table. Maybe smaller. Maybe lonelier. But it was mine. A soft ping from my phone pulled me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Amy's boyfriend. Thanks for trusting me. I'll do my best. I smiled faintly. I didn't know if he could fix what was broken. Maybe no one could. But it wasn't my job anymore. That realization felt like closing a heavy door. Not slamming it in anger. Just shutting it gently. Locking it. And walking away. Because family, I realized, isn't just the people you're born to. It's the people who show up. The people who see you. The people who don't wait until the lights go out to remember you're there. And maybe someday, I'd build a family like that. But for now, I was okay sitting in the quiet. Because at last, it was my quiet. And no one could take that from me again.